Institute for Arts Integration and STEAM. And I want to take a moment to just walk you through this framework because there's so much richness here. And it's a really simple but powerful tool that we could use in order to help plan for any environment, in-person, remote learning, or hybrid teaching. So let's dive into that tool. Focus. So first of all, each of these 6 areas, these 6 buckets, if you will, come from the STEAM design process. So the Institute for Arts Integration and STEAM focuses on, and one component, STEAM, science, technology, engineering, the arts, and math, and how to make that happen. And we have a STEAM process that we use in order to consider how to create a lesson, as well as how students can work in and through those STEAM subject areas. And so what we've done is taken that same STEAM process, which is meant to help you consider a problem and work through it, and laid that over for this teacher planning framework. So I think that's really going to be a beneficial component for you because each of these steps align and they lead naturally to the next component. So the first one is about focus. And so in focus, what we're looking to do is to have an intention. So it's really important when we're working with planning that we don't get overwhelmed. And that is way too easy. And you all know that, right? When we start down the rabbit hole of tech tools and strategies and templates, suddenly it's like midnight and we've been on the computer for 6 hours and we got to get up at 6 in order to get ready for our students. And so everything becomes overwhelming. And when everything becomes overwhelming, we get paralyzed. When that happens, then suddenly we all go like this, la, 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 I don't want to hear anymore. I can't handle it. So what we're going to want to do is back out from that vicious overwhelm cycle, and you're going to create an intention, something that you want to focus on this year in order to get your students and yourself through this year as successfully as possible. And in fact, in a way that helps you thrive. So you're going to need to set the intention, your goal, whatever it is you want to think about in that at the very beginning, okay? You have to set that first. And when we're thinking about an intention, I want you to consider things like, what is going to help my students be as successful as possible this year in this situation? Now, when you ask that kind of a question, it changes what the rest of the plan looks like. Because if we're thinking in that kind of an intention, that framework, what's going to help them be as successful as possible in this situation this year, that means that perhaps you won't have to teach every single thing that you normally would because you can't get through all of that material when you're working at a distance or in a hybrid environment, or even in person, but 6 feet apart. So you're going to have to consider that. What does that mean to be successful? What does it look like for my students to have success this year? What's the critical benchmarks? What are the absolute have-to-haves that my students have to be able to do this year in order to be successful moving into another grade or moving into a different content area? So think about that first. One of your intentions could be about you. What do you need in order to thrive or be successful this year? What does that look like for you? Maybe it's that you have dedicated boundaries on when you're going to check email. Maybe it's you are going to have a dead stop at 5 p.m. every day, no matter what, because then you're going to focus on your family. For you, that's the way that you're going to get through this year with, in a way that helps you thrive, or at the very least, helps you get through this year and manage it without feeling overwhelmed. So again, set your intention at the very top, and we give you some examples. Let me show you that again so that you can see. You're going to see that down here. So I want my students to be successful in this new learning experience, or I want to strike a balance with my family and with school this year. You need to write that down. And then consider, is this rooted in an outcome or a process? So is your focus going to be on a specific outcome, that all of your students pass this particular level this year? That is your intention? Or is it that they become critical thinkers or flexible thinkers, so that they can operate in a variety of different environments? That would be based in a process. So think about that. There's just no right or wrong here. You don't want to put emphasis on one or the other. It's just, what is it? Is it an outcome or is it a process? And then we move into the detail section. So this is analyze and ask questions. What do I need in order to make my intention happen? Okay, and from there, once you ask that question, you're going to pick 3 things that would make your intention possible. So if your intention is that you want students to be successful in this new learning experience, what are 3 things that you're going to need in order to have that happen? All right, so when you think about that, if it's to be successful, are they going to need internet access? Maybe. Okay, are they going to need one-on-one time with you, or are they going to need collaborative experiences with their peers? Are they going to need breaks in order to be creative and move? You need to think about those kinds of things. What is it? What are 3 things that are going to be game changers for your students in order to achieve the intention that you set into place? And if you want more information about that, or more details or explanations on that, I've included that in the text for this article. So definitely be sure to check that out. But I just want you to be thinking in that frame for right now in terms of section 2 with analyze and ask questions. And again, no right or wrong. You're just simply looking at what your intention is and then selecting 3 things. And the reason we pick 3 things is so that you don't get overwhelmed. Again, so you don't go down the rabbit hole. If you pick Flipgrid, you need to have Flipgrid this year in order for your students to have success, then you can let go of Edpuzzle and Kahoot and a million other tech tools, because you're going to focus on Flipgrid, right? And that lifts a weight for you. Section 3, discovery. This is sometimes the most difficult one of all, developing personal meaning. So you're going to want to ask the hard question, why and when does this matter? And again, this is related back to that intention. So again, if your intention is, I want my students to be successful in this new learning experience, then you have to think about all of the other expectations that are being placed on you and on your students, and think about those. And it could be expectations that are real, like you have to show up for work from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. online, right? Like that may be what is required of you. That's an expectation. Or it could be a perceived expectation that I need to work until whenever at night in order to achieve and finish everything that I need to get done. And it doesn't matter if I have a home life or not, I need to be working until 10 o'clock at night in order to get everything done. That might be a perceived expectation. To each of us, it could be very, very real, but it may not be written in stone. It just may be what we have perceived the expectation to be. So you're going to want to create a list of everything that is an expectation for you for this year. And it may be different than what was an expectation last year, right? Make a list of all of those. And then, this is where the magic happens, my friends. This is when you go into the AcceptReject chart. So you're going to have this little chart here of expectations. You're going to look at that list and you're going to think, am I willing to accept this expectation? Am I willing to accept it? It doesn't mean you have to like it, but are you willing to accept it? It's a choice. If you are, put it in the accept category. If you're not, you have to then reject that. So let me give a practical example. Let's say one of our perceived expectations is that we have to be online as much as possible so that students have access to us, because they may not have access to anybody else in their home. Okay, that's a perceived expectation. we may reject that expectation. We may say, I'm not going to accept that. I'm going to set specific times that I can meet with my students, but it's not going to be at all hours of the day. And if they need me at other times, we're going to work on that in a case-by-case basis, but I'm not going to set up this parameter that it's okay that everybody gets access to me all the time, because that's not healthy for me and it's not healthy for them. So I'm going to reject that expectation and perhaps adjust it to make it more acceptable for me, okay? There is a magic that happens here, because when you accept something, an expectation, then you're willing to work towards it. And if you're able to reject some expectations or perceived expectations, that gives you the freedom to then focus on that acceptance. You can then look at, what can I let go? Now that I've rejected these, what can I let go of in order to focus on what I've chosen to accept? Okay. Now, sometimes this is hard. That's why I said this is sometimes the most difficult component. But here's a way that I like to do it. Sometimes the choices are kind of stinky either way, right? So I pretend that the choice is a hat, and I put the hat on. I try it on and see how it feels. I might think of it as an outfit, whatever. I'm going to try it on and see how that feels. And I might take a day to wear it and see if I like it. And see if I don't like it, can I at least accept it? And if I can, it goes in the acceptance column. And if it's something that I'm just like, oh, this is giving me hives, I can't wear this, I'm going to be miserable if I have to do this, it goes in the reject category. And that makes it a really simple conversation for you to be able to have. So I know a lot of you right now are going, oh, but my administrator is going to, I don't get a choice here. These are the expectations. Okay. All right, so those are the expectations that have been set. You still get to choose what you are willing to accept and what you need to reject for your own health and sanity and for the betterment of the students. And what this does is it gives you an opportunity to then have a conversation with your administrator and to say, these are in a category that I just don't think that I can handle right now in this capacity. Can we adjust them in some way in order to make it a better fit for both me and my students? See how that works? Okay, now let's take a look at the next column, because this is the one where most people mistakenly start. Most people start here. We start working in creating a solution, right? We start writing the plan before having considered these other three sections. And now that you've been through these other three sections, I'm hoping that you can see, oh yeah, that lays a whole lot of groundwork, right? Because how are you going to create a plan without an intention of what you actually need to accomplish, right? And how are you going to write a plan if you don't know specifically how you're going to meet those intentions? And how are you going to create a plan if you don't know what's going to overwhelm you and make you stretched too thin, right? So you have to do those first three. Then you can actually create your plan. And you're looking at, what plan can I create that best serves me and my students, right? You're going to think about these things. This is your action plan. Parent communication, outline, and strategies. Class community building and SEL. No more than 3 tech tools that are absolutely essential. No more than that, okay? Because after that, then you start to get overwhelmed again. Later on, when you've got this under control, then you can start to add additional tools, but not just yet. You're going to look at your schedule, grading policy, and office hours. I call that organizational tools, okay? And then the most important parts of the curriculum that you have to cover. That's going to be the core of your plan. And you're going to want to think about, if I implement this plan, will my students' social emotional learning, academic, and creative essentials be met? Because that is what creates the whole child, right? All right, so when you're taking a look at that plan, also keep in mind, this is not an essay, right? We're not writing a college paper here. You are taking these first 3 sections to inform this plan of yours. And your plan could be a simple outline. You have those 5 components, right, that we just talked about: parent communication, class community building and SEL, tech tools and strategies, schedule, and curriculum, right? You have them in those 5 outlines, and then you just simply put in there bullet points. This is what I'm going to do, and this is when I'm going to do it, and this is why. This is the overarching intention of why I'm doing these 5 things this way, right? You're going to create your plan, and that way you have it in front of you. And honestly, the shorter this plan is, the better, because you want this ideally to be something that you reference on the daily, so that you constantly remind yourself, okay, this is why I'm doing this. Is this important? This thing that just came in my email, does it fall into one of these buckets? Does it fall into the plan that I've created for this week? If not, okay, this is going to sit here for a little while so that I can focus on what's most important for me and my students right now. Okay, that's what kind of a plan that we're looking to create. All right, now let's take a look at the next section. The next section is all about presentation, right? This is, how am I going to implement this plan? Now that I have this plan, how am I going to implement it? So you're going to want to think about everybody who would be affected by this plan. So consider these questions as you implement, okay? How, when, and where am I communicating? Are my expectations in line with capacity? We're going to circle back to these questions, friend. How are my stakeholders seeing and hearing this? What makes this plan effective or ineffective? And is my communication and implementation clear? All right, now your reflection question again ties back to that initial ask. Was my communication and delivery of this plan effective? So let's talk about this for a moment. This is really about communication and being as clear as possible with your communication. But here's the real kicker, the one that I really want you to think about. Are my expectations in line with capacity? And it could be capacity of your students. It could be your own capacity given everything else that you have going on right now. It could be a combination of those two. It could be the capacity of the parents to support the children in what you're trying to teach. You see where I'm going with this, right? You need to evaluate as you're implementing this plan, is it in line? Is this plan with my expectations in line with capacity that we have right now? Okay, so this whole piece is really about putting this into action. Now, I want you to go into this section, this implementation section, which is where you put the plan in action, right? You actually do the plan that you've just created for yourself. I want you to do this section with absolutely no expectations, okay? When you have expectations, sometimes they get met and sometimes they don't. And they don't, you get really disappointed, and you can fall into this trap of this whole, I didn't do this well, or I didn't do it right. And then we put a whole lot of judgment on ourselves and our own capacity, right? So we're going into this with no expectations. What we're looking at this, I want you to reframe your mindset. When you put your plan for how you are going to teach your students to meet the intention that you have set, when you put that into action, I want you to look at this like a scientist would and think about what's working and what's not working, and how might I be able to shift some things around in order to make it better. Okay, you're just looking at this as a critical observer, not as a judgment of whether or not you are a good teacher or that this plan was any good. Make sense? All right, now let's take a look at the last section. This is oftentimes the easiest one, but most often skipped, and I really don't want you to skip this. The link section. This is when you evaluate and reflect, and this happens at the end, okay? So this doesn't happen until the spring or the summer. You're gonna ask what is going well and what needs to shift. Now, I like to use this as a prompt around January so that I can make changes to the plans as I need. But really, I go in depth in this at the end of the year. What's going well and what needs to shift? So go back and look at steps 1 through 5, and then think about small tweaks that you could make that would make this an even better experience for the next time that we have to do it, and then write that down. So when we're thinking about small tweaks, okay, I'll give you a practical example. When we first started our Arts Integration Certification Program, it looks very different than what it looks like now. we started with 45-minute lessons. And there were 6 of those in every sprint, and there were 6 sprints. So we were looking at 6 lessons times 6 sprints. That was 36 lessons at 45 minutes apiece. It was really long. We didn't have office hours. We didn't have a lot of chatting going back and forth with the cohorts. We didn't have a community space for people to get together. All of the things that we now have in place for our learners that makes it such an awesome experience, we had to learn over time, and we had to make small tweaks each year. So we didn't add everything that we do now. We didn't add it all the second year. We added office hours the second year, right? And we changed the length of the lessons. So we did small tweaks, and then we saw how that worked, and we listened again, and we looked at everything in total. And then by the 3rd year, we made a couple of other tweaks based on feedback, right? So again, not a judgment. You're just looking at this and thinking, what small tweaks can I use to make this better for next time? And I think we have all gotten into that trap a lot, with the difference between spring and having an emergency teaching experience, and the upcoming fall semester, and heading into who knows how long, where we're now in this possibly remote virtual learning experience, sometimes in person. And I think a lot of us are going, oh, but spring was terrible. Spring was awful, and so remote learning does not work. And it can work. We've seen it work in a variety of situations. What we need to do is remember that the spring was emergency. That was us going, full stop. We're going to put a Band-Aid on this right now to get us through the end of the year. What we could learn from that is, what were the things that we did, that we stumbled upon, that were actually pretty good? What were the things that happened that were not good at all? We really don't want to replicate that as we go in with intention for this new learning experience. See, that's where that section 6 is so important. View of the tool was helpful for you, please download it, use it. We have it as a Google Doc so that you can easily copy it and put it right into your own drive, so that you can use it with your team and yourself. And I hope that this helps to take off some of the burden and the overwhelm, and allows you the gift of space and time to really be able to embrace the learning experience as best as we possibly can.